All right, 6:30. Get started with the pledge.
Of the United States of America. To the republic for which it stands.
Jason Stone. Present. Brittany Layton.
Present.
Amanda Jessamine.
Here.
Scott Meyer. Here. Sean Coughlin.
Here.
And Mr. Gavin.
Yeah.
Here. And we're missing Jason Stone. He is issued. All right, so we have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is to consider approval of the minutes from 9/27/22. For a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries. Next item is new business for a public hearing for case number 05 STP 2022, the Store-Mor Self-Storage site.
All right. Excuse me, Scott, did you want to go ahead and sign those minutes? So I did. Okay, great. All right.
Yeah. We were walking in.
All right, so the only item of business on tonight's agenda for new items is the Store-Mor Self-Storage, and this is a project that is proposed at 3103 West 1000 North or 96th Street. The zoning on the property is Industrial 2 or I2, and that's a grandfathered designation that was carried over from Hancock County. Tony Matthews, who's in the audience here tonight, the AC Matt Holdings LLC purchased the CLM Pallet Company site. And it should be noted that CLM will continue to operate on the property. And Mr. Matthews would like to construct a self-storage facility along the east portion of the property, which would be along Shaw Street, also known as 300 West. So specifically tonight, in accordance with our procedures, they're seeking a concept site plan approval. And the project consists of 3 clusters of self-storage buildings totaling about 51,900 square feet in size. And I wanted to note that it also includes boat storage on gravel parking, which was previously allowed by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So if we take a look at the aerial or the parcel map of this area, of course, it's on the north side of the CSX railroad tracks, and it is south of some of the newer subdivisions in the city of Fishers off to the north. And if we take a look at the oblique aerial, you can see the CLM pallet site. You can see the blue and white dots. That is the boat storage. The area with the star is generally the area where they would like to place this self-storage facility. And in terms of some ground photos, this is taken from Shaw Street or 300 West. Of course, I'm sure everybody's fairly familiar with the site, as it's a pretty visible location in town. It's basically the empty grass area on the CLM grounds. And just for reference, you can see the gravel road that is Shaw Street extending out to the power substation to the south. If we take a look at the Zoning map, again, as I mentioned, it's a heavy industrial zoning district that was carried over from Hancock County that we recognize today. If we look at some of the surrounding zoning off to the west and to the east, is light industrial. Off to the north is a planned unit development residential zone in the city of Fishers, and there's also parcel No parcel that is zoned R1.0 and the unincorporated areas of. We've included in tonight's packet 3 excerpts from the civil plan submittal that they provided. This one shows an overall view of the site plan, and you can see where it is in relation to the CLM building that stands there today. Of course, it's off on the right-hand portion of the screen to the east side of the building. And then as we zoom in, you can see that it would feature a paved roadway in gray that would loop around the site, and the site would be flanked by self-storage buildings. And it should be noted that there is a potential for the applicant that they would like to convert some of these larger self-storage buildings into possible small space for contractors, other laborers that may need space in the growing area of Fortville and Fishers for that matter as well. And then lastly, here is the landscape plan. So in terms of the project analysis, the typical review items on the site plan for the zoning ordinance that would be reviewed would be the following. First, it should be noted that this did go to the technical review committee and was reviewed by the fire department, town engineer, myself, and Joe Renner on behalf of the Public Works Department. So getting back to the actual analysis, first item to look at is access. So the main access would be from 1000 North. Essentially, there'd be 2 access points through the existing parking lot. There would not be any access to Shaw Street. And for the fire department, based on their review, adequate access and turning radii has been provided for fire trucks in terms of the interior layout of the project. Second basic thing that we look at, of course, would be setbacks and height for the I2 zoning. So per that zoning district, the maximum height is 45 feet. So no particular issue there with these buildings, which I'll show you some elevations here momentarily. In terms of the setbacks, front setback would be the north side, and they'd have to have a minimum of 50 feet. So they're well in excess of that. To the south along the railroad tracks, that'd be a rear setback, so the minimum is 20 feet. Again, this project would be in excess of that. The east side of the project would technically be a front setback because it's along public right-of-way, Shaw Street. The BZA did allow a minimum of 20 feet for a variance that they issued in July. Ordinarily, it has to be 50. And then on the west side, that setback is 20 feet. At this point in time, there's no plans to subdivide this parcel. It will remain on the same parcel as the main CLM property. So no issues with that setback here. In terms of parking, the amount that's required would be 10 spaces plus 1 ADA space, equaling 11 at a minimum for this self-storage use. They'd be providing 13, so they meet the requirements there. The providing parking lot curves is required around any portions of the lot not to be permanent. It should be noted that north of the property, the plan is to develop the property into commercial office and or retail or service space. And that project would be in a future phase, and they're still working on a variety of different design concepts on that. Screening is also something to take a look at. They plan on providing a decorative 8-foot tall wood shadow box fence along the north portion of the property and some landscaping. And then they would put an 8-foot tall chain link fence around the remainder of the site for security. That shadow box fence We would have to take a look at it in the future as that phase 2 develops to see if that needs to be adjusted, but at least for the foreseeable future, it would provide screening out to 96th Street. In terms of landscaping, they'd be providing the mound with trees and shrubs along the south side of the property that's there today would remain. And shrubs and trees would be provided both in and around the site. In terms of lighting, all new building mounted lighting will be required to point downward for the ordinance. And this will be reviewed carefully in the construction documents. No building plans have not yet been provided for this project this early in the project design. Should be noted that no parking lot lights are anticipated to be provided. And then in terms of drainage, the site is very flat. Parking lot drain tiles will be provided, and required on-site detention will be provided. And in this case, since it's the same property, it would be on the CLM property. They provide that detention as required by the stormwater ordinance before being conveyed into the town's stormwater system. And I know the engineer's been working very carefully with the county surveyor who conducts those drainage reviews in looking at, and they do look at our own town zoning, our town stormwater ordinance to make sure it's done in accordance with that. In terms of architecture, and I'll show you the buildings in a bit. Metal buildings are allowed in industrial zoning. One item that is required for the zoning ordinance is that facades that exceed 50% metal shall contain other design elements such as concrete or masonry bases, pitch roofs, or other color variation, which they essentially intend on doing all three of those things. Show you here in a moment. So this is a basic example of a project that we did, I think, off of Minhoffer Road in Lawrence or Indianapolis. But in terms of the basic architecture, this is what they are looking to accomplish, something similar to this. So you can see there's a brick wainscot along the bottom that we provided really around any of the visible areas of the project. Unlike this particular example, of course, as I mentioned, the road would be paved throughout the site, at least in terms of the architecture. It's understandably fairly utilitarian, but I think it gives you a good example of what they're looking to accomplish. In terms of remonstrance on this project or any public feedback, we haven't received any. All public hearing requirements were completed, and that included putting up a sign, conducting the mailing, and posting the legal ad in the newspaper to bring to the reporter. So lastly, with that, my recommendation would be to approve the concept site plan, the concept landscaping, and the concept building foundations. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those, and the owner and the engineer both attend here tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions for Adam? Or sure.
What do they mean by the contractor spaces in the larger?
Well, I'll allow them to expand a little bit more on that.
If you would state your name and purpose.
My name's Don Fisher. I'm with Insights Engineering. You're representing ACM Mat Holdings, and I'm the designer for this project. When we recognize that this area has a lot of contractors, a lot of construction going on, and some contractors need an outpost type facility, like a contractor, a plumbing contractor, or even establish a business. So we're looking at the being able to have really proceeded to operate these facilities instead of just being a self-service residential type of storage.
So are you talking like an office operation or just like a primary material storage? Like, I'm just trying to understand.
So that's fine. So some either way, really, because some people say you have to have a small contracting business here, but growing, this would be a nice step for them to be able to set up the next step, right? Have one or two offices inside of a building with a little warehouse space to be able to.
Wouldn't that conflict with, would that still be inside of your gates?
Yes.
So those are mostly key coded, right?
Right.
So for somebody to come visit, they'd have to have a key code?
Not very many people visit a plumber or an electrician.
Okay, so we're not talking like storefront type, just offices, storage.
Right.
That's
More.
that's
of
the
a
part I was trying to make
contractor
sense of.
business type. Now, this phase of the project is not expected to be like insurance or a home builder or something.
Are you talking about open air storage or just storage within the confines of one of those units?
So the storage is inside except for our main book storage. Got that. Right. So we'd still have that. If you look at this site plan, there's the buildings on the east and west perimeter. And there's the kind of the grayish area, that's asphalt or concrete pavement. And then the part in the middle is what we're planning for boat storage and RV storage, and security. There's also additional RV and boat storage available, I guess boat storage available behind the CLM, like has happened over the years. And got actually legalized this last July.
Any other questions?
Quick process question would have, future site. If this is approved, does that still have to come back before this group, or is that like goes through technical committee look at it? I'm just concerned if the future site is Starbucks and they want to put an access point in between the two drives, that can look at.
Yeah, to answer your question, absolutely, it would have to come back for review.
Okay.
It depends on, there will absolutely have to be some level of review by staff. Sure. And as it stands today, the procedure is, of course, that all commercial site plans go to the planning commission for review and approval. We simply don't know if it takes 15 years to develop, if that process will still be in place in terms of that approval, but
Sure.
the bottom line is there will absolutely be oversight, either by staff or the board in the future.
Can you reference a review of the fence somewhere in the future? What do you mean by that?
Sure. So some of the concept plans, the sketch plans that we had taken a look at involved putting some parking spaces in this particular area where the cursor is. And so I'm assuming you would probably just want to pull the fence back at that point in time. We'd have to evaluate it to see how it would mesh with the project in the north. But
I think part of what we were thinking is if we build, say, two buildings to the north of this, the main grass area south of 96th Street, then there would potentially still be a gap to see inside this area. So would you then leave the fence there, or would you move it out closer, or would you use landscaping along 96th Street, a hedge row, or something like that that could block the view? That's what Ann and I talked about. Things that would probably change, that this gives it, the block that we need today, but things develop in the next phases and we would come back, that would be something we would address.
So to the south, where the berm is, or the hill, whatever you want to call it, and there's some foliage there, if you will. Are we going to enhance that any? I'll tell you exactly where I'm headed with this, is the visibility from, as we drive into town. I'll just say it, I'm not a big fan of the view of the CLM property coming into our town.
Sure.
So while I firmly believe in the necessity of the storage units, it's still not a pretty sight, the entire project. Is there anything to enhance that, or is that part of this, or you just gonna leave it all the same, and we're still gonna see it all from
Well, I can,
69?
and part of that is housing. The question is, you may have noticed since, Tony Matthews bought the property, that the mowing improved significantly. The look along the mounds is a lot better.
I actually have noticed that.
It made my job a lot easier out there too. But, there is no plan today to accent those mounds or anything. And of course, there's a gap between them, and that's where the railroad's supposed to come. So that's part of the issue that you want to see in the CLM. Now, you may have also noticed that he's also forced CLM to reduce their mountains of mulch.
Yeah, the stockpile, yeah. I have noticed that as well.
Okay, that's good. In fact, as part of this project, we're gonna remove more mulch. I'm thinking maybe the town can use it as a farmers. Because there's a lot of mulch there that they use. They just put it on the ground instead of gravel. And so we've got that to get rid of. Probably about 2 feet thick on the part of the site. So I'm not, at this time, I'm not really sure how we can impact that view through that gap much.
Yeah, the gap's probably not much to do, but
No.
I just want to be cognizant that the view from the south side and the north side coming into town is not one of industrial,
So obviously, as you're going west, once these are built, you won't be able to see behind the CLM, which will help that view quite. From the other view, I think, the guys west hasn't really built anything.
well, people heading west have already been through town, so we've made our impression of
Yeah.
focus on people coming into town from the west, that their first view is that, and that's always been kind of a little bit of an eyesore, but you have made great improvements, thank you. So just a general question, that's something that's really important to me is,
It's got, that's a great point from, they got me thinking that I noticed just today, coming in, that there are some trees that are dead over there. And if you're inclined, this might be a good opportunity to, you may want to put a condition on here if you're inclined to say that any disease or dead trees, not shall be replaced with a similar tree at the time they do this project.
Any of those conditions can still be approved by the town council, right?
No, because for site plans, it does not go to any other public body. So just really quickly for everybody, as a reminder as to how the process works. And so you're basically approving the concept here tonight. And then they would work on their final civil construction documents, i.e. the designs for the site. And then they would also file building plans for the actual structures themselves, and that would be a staff review. So, but if there are any conditions that the planning commission wishes to impose on a project for the site plan, as long as it's a reasonable condition and there's a rational nexus between the type of project, then we would just make sure that those are enforced as the project moves along in the process.
so with replacing dead trees, making a little improvement there, nothing stringent, would that cause us significant amount of distress to your project?
I just confirmed that the dead trees that are on the mountains that visible from the highway would be replaced as part of this project.
Okay. So that's your word, I don't feel that we need a condition, so we'll put you to the test with that, how's that?
Fine.
But at least that's my take on it, it's not my decision whether we make it a condition that's this body group, but that's just my suggestion. So are there any other questions?
Yeah. You had mentioned, at least the plans had mentioned that there were no plans for like parking lot style lights or anything like that. Are there plans for a security system inside this lot to make sure that we're not gonna have anyone trying to get in?
There'll be cameras. Yeah, definitely cameras. We have none on the other side. And just let you know, I don't like the pallet company myself, all the trash, the mound. You know, I've been on
6 months to get rid of that. So they finally did. Now they got a lot of homes there that he's trying to get rid of and sell them. So we don't like the book either.
That makes you a good neighbor. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion and recommendation.
I will make a motion to approve case number 05 STP 2022 Store-Mor Self-Storage site plan.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Congratulations, sir. Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you guys for your time.
That is the last item on the agenda. Do we have any staff comments?
No, for me, unless you have any, questions or anything.
Any board comments?
Oh, actually, let me just,
No, you had.
real quick, I'll do it real quick. I just want to bring everybody up to speed on the update of the subdivision control ordinance, zoning ordinance, plan that we talked about. So the next step is. So, the next step in the process is I'm gonna put together, a Word version of the document, put it on a shared drive, and then, probably in the middle of November is when the study committee will get together to go over those edits, for further discussion. Of course, as we had mentioned in a previous meeting, we'll send it out to the entire group, and, the public will also be invited to those meetings as well, just so it's transparent and if anybody, has any issue with particular proposed changes or things in that code that we haven't thought about at the time. So
We're still going to send out the original version for the committee to review and ponder, and then get the revised.
right, so what I'm thinking about is it'll be the actual Word document of the code that we use today with track changes, basically suggested markups to the code that anybody can put on there that has access to the shared drive, which will be everybody on the council and the planning commission. So,
Is it unreasonable to send out that Word document now? So if anybody wanted to preview that before the edits,
yeah, I suppose we can do that.
that way
It's
it's
probably a good idea, because it's gonna take me a little time, because I had been tracking, really ever since we used the zoning ordinance, in 2020. Like I said, I think overall, it works very well for the community, but there are some particular clauses in there that we've noticed that are problematic and need to be fixed. So I think it's a pretty good start.
But yeah, if everybody gets a
Yeah, I
an
can
edited view of
I
it,
can probably do that tomorrow.
Okay.
Get it out there so we can get moving.
if everybody would take time to review that, come up with their own suggestions, and when they present their edited view, you'll have some predetermined knowledge of some things you want to discuss or throw out.
And so I think we were gonna start with the zoning ordinance at this particular time. Since that's really the most pressing.
Thank you. So are you done?
I'm done.
Any other board comments? Motion to adjourn. At 7:00, we have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, give a second.
Aye.
Adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Have a good night, everybody.